Hello, welcome to Office Hours. And on this beautiful Wednesday, a little bit later than usual, and yet here I am. It's still Wednesday. And as I have this new space I created for my live yoga sessions on Tuesdays, 9:15 a.m. Eastern Time. If you haven't seen it yet, here it is. So on Tuesdays, I'm live for a yoga class. Wednesdays, I'm here for office hours. I welcome any questions you may have about life that I can bring into here and bring the aspect of mindfulness to you. And I just had a session this morning, actually noon, with a wonderful group of people, seasoned adults, and it was fabulous. We had a great time, and it was our first session of 6. And so what is today's conversation? Actually, in that one, at the end of the session this morning, noon, somebody was talking to me about active listening. And I thought that is actually a great idea to talk about today and that I want to share with you. So what is active listening? Active listening is exactly what it says. It's listening actively, right? So let me put the scenario first. Maybe you're here listening to me, watching what I do, and at the same time, your brain is able to comprehend all the other things that are happening. Maybe you are in a busy environment, maybe in a restaurant, maybe you're driving. God knows where you are tuning in from. And wherever you are, something additional than just what you're paying attention to is going on in your brain. Your brain is like a computer, right? It's almost like if you have the internet open and then you have all these tabs open. I don't know about you. How many tabs do you have open? I currently have 5 tabs open on my phone, and on my computer, probably 1 or 2. So I don't have many tabs open on my internet. And so email, inbox, same thing, right? How many emails, unread emails do you have in your inbox? How full is your inbox? Do you have subfolders or not? How organized is pretty much the question, are you? Because the more organized you are, the easier it is to compartmentalize your thoughts. And so why is this important when we talk about listening? Because when I'm listening, there's always, and why do I bring this even up? I just realized the reason I brought this up is because our brain is always active. Something's running on the back burner. It's like, did I turn off the stove? I'm hungry, what I'm gonna eat? Oh, I haven't figured out dinner yet. I gotta get something for dinner. Oh, do I have to pick up my kids? Or, do I have plans for dinner? Whatever it is. Obviously, we have our phones that are super useful to keep us on track for all these things. And yet, at the same time, our brain is continually running on the back end of what to remember, right? So, when we have a conversation with one another, if we would be sitting in the same room and we are here to talk with one another, that back processor is still running. It doesn't stop because we're having a conversation together. It actually never stops. Even while you're sleeping, it's still active, right? So what happens is we're in a conversation with one another, and let's say I share something to you about the weather, my morning walks, for example, right? And in the back of your head, something comes up to your mind. Either you remember something I shared earlier today, because that's what I do on stories on a daily basis. I'll share things on stories. So maybe there's something that's back of your head, or maybe you are thinking about, oh yeah, that's exactly one thing I wanted to do, go outside and take a walk, so maybe I'm gonna go now, let me bring this because it doesn't really matter. So all these things are going on, right, on the back of the head, and you are going to make a conscious decision to do something. Those thoughts are very subconscious. The moment we are in conversation with someone, guess what happens? That's still going on, right? So whenever somebody's sharing with you something, your brain is going to grab something from its archive or whatever processor, and it's going to be spitting it out. For example, I have a conversation about thoughts that I had in regards to the work that I did today. Like at the end of the day, I'm sharing this with my spouse, blah, 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 blah. He stops and he's like, oh no. And I'm like, what did I say? Did I say something that, made you say, oh no? I was like, oh, I was just thinking about work. Okay. Where do you think that mind was? Was it here in the conversation with me? Or was it picking up on something I said that then your brain jumped right away to a topic that it was thinking about, that was connecting for whatever reason, right? We don't know why and how our brain is picking up on something and why it makes sense of something or not. We don't always know that. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Most of the time, I would say, we don't. Anyway, so it becomes extremely challenging, and that person actually shared with me, is when you are intentively need to listen, want to listen to that person in front of you. Actively being considerate of all the things they said, and you would have to repeat back of what they said. Would you be able to repeat back what they said without your interpretation of what they said? I want to repeat that again. Will you be able to repeat what the person was talking about without your own interpretation of what they said? Unless you are consciously listening to them, unless you're consciously wanting to listen to the person without your input, yes, you can. Yes, you will. And most of the time, it probably isn't happening. What probably is happening is that person is sharing something with you, and in your brain, you're already preparing what you're going to say that is related to an experience that you had. Meaning, most of our conversations are selfish conversations because all we want to talk about is ourselves. This is why I'm doing these lives, so I can just talk by myself and you are just going to listen and do whatever you want to do with it. Joking. Well, maybe somewhat, right? So all I'm saying is, it is really, really difficult to actually actively listening to the person that is speaking by just listening to what they're saying without putting our interpretations and understandings, but just pure listening. And maybe we feel like, I don't understand what they're talking about. This is so foreign. Maybe that's a thought that's coming up. And yet I can translate, or rather I can practice and focus. Okay, I'm not understanding this. Okay. And you keep listening. You keep listening. Tune in. What are they saying exactly? And maybe you have a question. So what we are not really good at is, one, active listening, and then two, asking questions to further understand what the person is sharing. Oftentimes the questions that we are asking is not to clarify what they just said, but something that we have questions about for ourselves. Let me think of an example. I'm telling you about active listening, all this and that, and then your question isn't necessarily like, oh, I found that super interesting. Like, how does that really work? Like, how would you do that, and how does it work for you, right? The questions will maybe be more around, ooh, that sounds interesting. Yeah, I noticed that I have a really hard time listening. Or, I never thought about this. I wonder how that would affect my conversation with the next person that I'm coming in contact with. do you notice? Do you hear the difference between actively listening, asking questions about what is being said, versus actively listening to what you want to add to the conversation? And I want to make a huge pause here. I am not saying that all we need to do is active listening. It is not always necessary to active listening, because we're all so used to having these conversations with one another where I'm sharing something, you share something, I share something, you share something. That's okay. I don't think anybody will be upset. There are moments though where one person is sharing something that is very important to them, that maybe requires a little bit more finesse and care and curiosity of what they're going through. So instead of letting our brains to just do the regular thing they're doing, in mindfulness, for example, we're asking our brain to share whatever it's having, like whatever thoughts I'm having, and I make an active decision. How do I want to interact with that person? How do I want to continue the conversation? Maybe you're not interested. How about we just say, it's like, wow, that sounds pretty intense, which I have a lot, right? That sounds pretty intense and I cannot comprehend this. And I don't know if right now is a good time for me because I had work all day. I cannot take in another thing. And the other person has to be okay with that too. So it's a two-way street, right? There are moments where we want to give our all to be active listening to the person, show interest and curiosity, tell me more kind of experience. There's moments where we just want to have an engagement and just hang out and just whatever. And go back and forth and such. And then there are times where we want to be the ones being heard. And we are the ones that share something that we want the other person to show a little bit more interest. And so no matter which situation you find yourself in, active listening is definitely a practice. And so with today's office hours, I invite you to practice active listening by repeating back of what people have said and shared with you. Because sometimes you'll be surprised how what you understood and how you interpret things is not what the person was saying. Maybe partially, but some things maybe that we have interpreted in our brains, that we have translated in our brains, might not be exactly what the person is talking about. And sometimes we even want to make that deeper connection by recognizing that we're never going to be on the same page. I don't get it what you're talking about, and that's okay. And so that's the other piece of active listening, is that I can be okay with not active listening to one another. If I choose to do so, please share it with one another. Let them know that they should not waste their energy and time on sharing something with you that you have zero interest in. So with that said, if you've gotten to this point, you chose to listen. Thank you so much for actively listening to me. Even if there might have been some thoughts that are coming up that brought you to some other place. And I would love to hear from you. How is it going for you in connection to listening? How does active listening show up in your life? And how does it feel when somebody is actively listening to you, showing interest in who you are, showing interest in what you share, and make you significant? And how would it feel to reverse the roles and give that back to someone else? So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions around active listening, if you want to practice active listening, feel free to reach out. I'd love to share more with you. And with this, I wish you a wonderful rest of the day. And now, go share your smile and a little hello with everyone you meet.